Hey guys, tonight we're trading our ergonomic office chairs and gluten-free snack packs for a trip back to a time when survival meant something a little more literal. The Great Depression, as experienced by the unsung legends of the era, Housewives. These were women who could whip up a three-course meal out of turnips, shoe leather, and pure, unfiltered desperation. If you think your 5 p.m. meeting is stressful, imagine trying to stretch one potato to feed 6 people and the family dog, all before sundown, with a smile that says, yes, this is totally fine. But before we plunge into a world where bathtubs doubled as laundry machines and socks were just wishful thinking, do me a favor, hit the like button and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy this. Seriously, don't feel pressured. This isn't the 1930s, and I'm not your mother-in-law. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. Bonus points if you're already in your pajamas. Eating something suspiciously close to Depression-era stew. Now, let's get cozy. Dim the lights, flip on a fan for that white noise. Or, if you're feeling extra authentic, run out of quarters for the electricity meter and settle in. Maybe snuggle up with a blanket, preferably one that isn't stuffed with old newspaper. Let's ask the big questions. How do you keep a family of 7 alive on a budget that makes ramen noodles look fancy? What's it like to wash laundry when you don't have soap-running waterer optimism? Could you keep your cool making dinner with nothing but lard, canned beans, and the ghosts of better meals past? Did people really put ketchup on spaghetti? Did anyone ever actually enjoy liver loaf? And, most importantly, would your sanity survive when your only form of therapy is yelling at bread dough? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1933. Your savings are gone, your neighbor just borrowed your last coffee grounds, and the Hoover administration isn't returning your calls. Welcome to the daily grind. Depression style. It's sunrise in Depression America, which means time to assemble breakfast from whatever the mice didn't get to first. You shuffle to the kitchen, still half asleep, and boil water in the world's oldest percolator. Add yesterday's coffee grounds. Then, with the deft hand of a magician, you convince your family it's robust. Breakfast is cornbread if you're lucky, fried dough if you're not, and government cheese if you're blessed or cursed. The day's first meal isn't a celebration of abundance. It's a high-wire act of creative denial. You stare at the near-empty larder and become a breakfast impressionist, painting with the shades of almost out, barely enough, and let's pretend that's not mold. That can of evaporated milk is now an honored guest. Just don't look too closely at the date stamped on the bottom. You open it with the careful precision of a surgeon and pour a tiny splash into each mug of coffee. The goal isn't taste, the goal is color. You're not alone. Your kids appear, shuffling in with hair stuck to their heads in strange formations, wearing pajamas that started life as their father's old work shirts. There's a chorus of "What's for breakfast?" But the answer is a moving target. Sometimes it's porridge. Sometimes it's Johnny cake. And once in a blue moon, someone trades chores for a couple of eggs. You'd think kids would riot at the sight of plain oatmeal day after day, but honestly, they're just glad it's warm and mostly chewable. The stove radiates a tired kind of heat, fueled by whatever you could scavenge for kindling last night, usually wood, sometimes catalogue pages, occasionally a bit of last year's Christmas wrapping paper. The smell in the kitchen is part nostalgia, part desperation. You catch the aroma of frying dough mixing with faint smoke from the oven. If you're lucky, there's a sliver of bacon in the pan. If not, you just let the cornbread crisp until it pretends to be bacon by association. You try not to think about the coffee too hard. The first sip is less a flavor than a sensation, like hot water with a distant memory of coffee beans. It's enough to wake you up, though, and that's the point. Your husband grumbles, something about how his own mother made better coffee, which is a dangerous game to play in the middle of a famine. You raise an eyebrow and slide him the crustiest piece of bread as a gentle warning. There's a ritual to breakfast now. The ration book sits on the counter like a holy text. Every crumb is a small victory. Every plate that comes back scraped clean is a quiet triumph. You count slices of bread and argue with yourself about whether one child looks hungrier than the others. There's an art to cutting things thin, apples, cheese, the last bit of dignity in the house. Some mornings, there's a knock at the door, someone selling yesterday's newspapers, a neighbor with a sack of slightly bruised fruit, or a child from next door hoping for a spare biscuit. You find yourself negotiating breakfast trades, haggling over an extra cup of flour or the promise of a peach when summer comes. Everyone's hustling. And breakfast is the market where hope is swapped for calories. You pack lunches from what's left, a crust of bread, a dab of lard, maybe a spoonful of beans tucked into wax paper. You tuck these into battered tins with the seriousness of a banker. Don't trade unless it's for actual food. You warn, knowing full well your daughter will swap it for a pencil stub, and your son will come home with a pocket full of marbles and a stomach still rumbling. By the time you sit down to your own meal, lukewarm, always interrupted by a squabble or a spill, you've already been awake for hours. Breakfast isn't a meal, it's a test. And every day you pass, it is a small miracle. You finish the last sip of coffee, scrape up the final crumbs, and tell yourself tomorrow will be different, or at least tomorrow you'll remember to hide the sugar. Because in the art of Depression-era breakfast, survival is a group project, and flavor is strictly optional. The real feast is in making it to lunch. Dinner planning is less a matter of what sounds good and more a question of what won't make us cry tonight. You stare at a can of beans and half a potato, do some soul-searching, and stretch it into a meal fit for six. Every bite is seasoned with love and the faint aroma of creative accounting. The ritual begins around noon, as you mentally inventory the kitchen. 1 shriveled onion, 2 carrots on the verge of giving up, a mysterious jar of pickles, and the ever-reliable can of beans, the holy grail of the depression pantry. You lay everything on the table as if auditioning them for a role in a musical no one actually wants to see. The family gathers around, peering over your shoulder, all with the same expression. Is it soup again? You check the ration book. Flour? Down to the dregs. Sugar? Almost mythical at this point. Butter? Only in your dreams, unless you count the pat of lard hiding in the back of the icebox. Meat? If you're lucky, there's a suspicious-looking scrap of salt pork, and if you're really lucky, you can shave it into the pot without anyone noticing it's mostly rind. Tonight's dinner is a game of how little can we get away with. You peel that half potato like it's the Hope Diamond, saving every sliver. The can opener is revered, handled with solemnity usually reserved for family heirlooms, as you pop the top off the beans and pray for more than you remember. They clatter out into the pot with the promise of sustenance, and you let out a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding. Into the pot goes everything remotely edible. The last carrot is diced into oblivion. The onion is stretched further than a circus contortionist. And whatever spices remain at the back of the cupboard, mostly salt and optimism, are tossed in with a flourish. You stir, taste, and adjust. The beans, of course, are the star. Beans for protein, beans for fiber, beans for there's a reason every window in the house is cracked open after dinner. To give the illusion of abundance, you add water, transforming your meager stew into a meal that will, technically, fill the bowls. If you have flour, you make dumplings, tiny clouds of dough, floating like hopeful dreams in the bubbling pot. If not, you improvise with leftover bread. Or just tell everyone it's rustic and filling. As dinner simmers, the house fills with a smell that is at once comforting and suspiciously familiar, a reminder of last night's dinner and the night before that. Your youngest asks, "Are we having beans again?" And you reply with a speech worthy of a presidential address. Beans are good for you. Beans build character. Beans are nature's little miracle. Cheap, nutritious, and, when necessary, surprisingly versatile. Just wait until Saturday, you promise. Maybe we'll splurge on macaroni. The room buzzes with cautious optimism. The family gathers at the table, bowls lined up, spoons at the ready. You serve each portion with equal precision. No favoritism allowed when supplies are this thin. There's a moment of silent gratitude, not just for the food, but for making it through another day without anyone going truly hungry. Conversation is light, peppered with jokes about beans, hope, and the distant dream of pie. You remind the kids to eat slowly, to savor each bite. The meal lasts longer that way, and no one feels quite so empty when the bowls are finally scraped clean. After dinner, you scrape together the leftovers, if there are any, and tuck them away for tomorrow's breakfast or lunch. Waste is the true enemy. Even the bean water is saved for tomorrow's soup base, and potato peels are reserved for crisping in the oven as a late-night snack. As you wash the dishes, you look out the window at your neighbors' houses, where similar bean feasts are happening in quiet solidarity. You're all making dinner out of thin air and a can of beans, trading recipes and laughter, and learning that a meal is less about what's in the pot and more about who's around the table. And in the end, that's what keeps everyone alive. Beans, jokes, and the unbreakable bond of survival, one rationed bite at a time. Personal hygiene takes a hit when the only tub is metal, the water is cold, and modesty means bathing in the kitchen while the rest of the family pretends not to look. You boil water on the stove, pour it into the washtub, and brace for impact. Soap? If you have it, you use it sparingly. If not, you pretend scrubbing harder is basically the same. The official family bath day is less a matter of scheduling and more a matter of communal endurance. As the chosen day approaches, everyone gets just a little more tense, a little more pungent. There's an unspoken competition to see who can go the longest without being volunteered to go first. If you lose, congratulations. You get the freshest water, but also the highest audience attendance. You haul buckets of water from the sink, cold, always cold unless you're willing to burn precious coal or wood boiling enough for the tub. Once a small pot's worth of hot water is ready, you pour it into the metal basin, which hisses like it's offended to be part of this at all. Then you add as much cold water as you can stand, swirling it with a slotted spoon or your hand, praying for some miracle of warmth to remain. There's no bathroom, of course, just the kitchen, center of family life, culinary experiments, and now, public spa. Curtains are draped for privacy, but they're more symbolic than functional. The kids cluster nearby, pretending to be deeply engrossed in their homework or the newspaper comics. But you know they're secretly counting the number of times you yelp when you sit down in that ice-cold water. Soap is a luxury, hoarded like gold and cut into tiny slivers to make it last. Sometimes you use homemade lye soap, which smells like hope and burns like guilt. You ration every bar as if the government might confiscate it for being too decadent. Shampoo is whatever's left from the last time you watered down the bottle, plus a whispered prayer for manageable hair. The actual washing is an Olympic sport of speed and dexterity. The first 10 seconds are a battle of nerves as you try to ease into the freezing water, only to realize there's no easing involved, just getting it over with. You scrub, shiver, and try not to look anyone in the eye. Modesty is a distant memory. Dignity floats away with the soap suds. You focus on the important areas: hands, face, behind the ears, feet if you're feeling ambitious. You finish quickly. You have to. The water cools to Arctic temperatures before you're halfway through, and there's a line forming. One towel for everyone, rotated and hung to dry by the wood stove between uses. If you're lucky, it's not still damp from last week. You dry off as best you can, put on your least itchy pajamas, and try not to slip on the wet kitchen floor. Next up, the kids. You wash them one by one, refilling the tub with the occasional splash of boiling water, but mostly just letting everyone share the same grimy soup. The baby gets washed last, which is probably a violation of several modern health codes, but at least he's too young to remember. By the time everyone is cleanish, the water looks like a crime scene and smells like a barn. Cleaning the tub is a final indignity. You pour out the dirty water, mop the floor, and scrub the basin until your knuckles go white. The kitchen smells faintly of wet wool and old soap, but at least you can say you tried. You collapse into a chair, exhausted and faintly lemon-scented, while the rest of the family parades around, squeaky and smug for at least 10 minutes. For the next few days, there's a strange sense of pride, as if everyone's walking on air, or at least slightly less sticky ground. You all know the clean feeling is fleeting. By Wednesday, the familiar aroma of lived-in returns, and the countdown to next week's torture begins. Because in Depression, America, bath day isn't about luxury. It's about survival, stubbornness, and the guilty hope that next time, someone else goes first. You've never really appreciated clean socks until you're scrubbing them by hand in a bucket. Washing clothes means wringing, scrubbing, and praying no one else gets sick before laundry day rolls around again. The water is always cold, and the soap is always running out, if it exists at all. Laundry day arrives with a thud, usually the sound of a muddy shirt hitting the floor and a child yelling, "I didn't mean to fall in the creek." You can ignore it for a while, but eventually, the pile of dirty clothes in the corner starts to develop its own microclimate, threatening to qualify as a separate household resident. You look at the heap, sigh, and begin the ritual. Fill a battered metal tub with water, ice, cold, always. Grab what's left of the lye soap, and roll up your sleeves. It's time for war. First, you sort. Sort is a generous word. Everything's going in together, but you pretend otherwise, just to keep up morale. Whites, colors, and formally whites, it's all a suggestion. You brace for the splash as your hands plunge into water that has never once heard of central heating. The shock is enough to make you question every life choice that led to this moment. But you soldier on, because dirty socks don't clean themselves. Soap, when you have it, is used with the precision of a jeweler. You ration out tiny shavings, dissolve them into the water, and create a sudsy illusion that says clean if you don't look too closely. Most days, though, you improvise. A bit of baking soda if you have it, maybe a splash of vinegar, or just aggressive scrubbing and wishful thinking. If you're feeling fancy, you might even drag out the washboard, which has given more blisters than actual results. The clothes themselves don't go quietly. Stains from grass, mud, and a mysterious orange substance you refuse to identify all fight to stay put. You wring and twist, working out every ounce of frustration from the week. The rhythm of laundry is strangely meditative. Scrub, dunk, wring, repeat. You mutter darkly about the inventor of corduroy and wonder why children are drawn to puddles as if they're portals to another world. There's always a wild card. Someone announces they have nothing to wear just as the last shirt goes into the tub, or the baby decides it's the perfect time for a surprise. You adjust, you adapt, you add another handful of laundry to the mountain. There are no breaks, not until every sock has been matched or creatively paired, and every pair of overalls is less crunchy than before. Rinsing is an adventure in itself. You dump the soapy water and refill the bucket, trying to wring out as much as possible. Rinse water turns grey immediately, and you pretend not to notice. The final step is the wringing, twist, squeeze, and pray your hands hold out. By the end, your arms ache, your back is sore, and you have a newfound appreciation for anyone who ever invented a washing machine. Drying the laundry is another logistical feat. If the weather is kind, you string up a clothesline in the backyard, fighting off birds and the neighbor's curious goat. If it rains, which it always does on laundry day, you drape wet clothes over every chair, door, and heater in the house. The kitchen becomes an obstacle course of flapping undergarments and shirts trying desperately to dry before the next round of mud. When it's all over, you collapse into a chair and admire your work. The house smells faintly of wet fabric, soap, and a hard-won sense of accomplishment. The family parades around in their freshly laundered, slightly stiff clothes, heads held high, noses twitching at the clean scent. You know it won't last. By tomorrow, someone will fall in the creek again, and it'll all begin anew. Laundry in the Depression isn't about perfection. It's about effort, grit, and celebrating small victories, like a matching pair of socks and a towel that only feels a little like sandpaper. You didn't just wash clothes, you won a tiny, soapy battle. And sometimes that's all anyone can ask. Armed with a handful of coins and a grocery list that reads like a prayer, you venture out. Every penny counts. You stand in line for government rations, barter with the butcher for bones, and stretch the concept of meal planning into a form of interpretive dance. The weekly grocery run isn't a chore. It's an emotional obstacle course. First, you take stock of your resources. A few battered dimes, some nickels, a precious dollar bill, and a pile of coupons meticulously clipped from newspapers and packaging. You check and recheck your grocery list, which is less a list and more a wishful thinking manifesto. Eggs, milk, flour, maybe apples. You cross your fingers and hope for a miracle. Stepping out, you join the parade of neighbors all marching the same route. Baskets dangling, shoes scuffed from a week's worth of hustling. There's a camaraderie among the desperate, a quiet nod, a smile that says solidarity, and an understanding that everyone's chasing the same elusive bargains. The first stop is usually the local grocer, where prices are posted with the dramatic flair of a plot twist. You scan the shelves, eyes darting for anything labeled on sale, manager's special, or not entirely moldy. You've become an expert at mental math, calculating the per-ounce price of beans versus lentils versus the mysterious, generic protein loaf. Every coin is a small decision. Should you buy 1 can of tomatoes or gamble on the possibility of butter? You weigh each choice, literally and figuratively, while the grocer keeps a wary eye on anyone who fondles the produce for too long. And then, the coupons. You dig them out like a card shark at a high-stakes table, matching each scrap of paper to an item in your basket. Sometimes the clerk frowns at your efforts. Sometimes you score a tiny victory, 10 cents off lard, a nickel saved on salt. You celebrate the wins, however small. The losses, like discovering the bread sale ended yesterday, are borne in stoic silence. Next comes the government ration line, the unofficial social hub of Depression-era America. You join the queue, shuffling slowly past crates of cheese, sacks of flour, and tubs of lard stamped with the mark of official charity. You chat quietly with others, trading tips and rumors. Heard they have oranges at Murphy's, but only for the early birds. The air is thick with anticipation, and the unspoken hope that maybe, just maybe, this week's handout will stretch a little further. The butcher is your last, most crucial stop. You approach with the tact of a diplomat and the tenacity of a bargain hunter. "Any soup bones today?" you ask, eyes lingering on the scraps in the display case. The butcher, who's seen it all, winks and slips you a marrow bone. "For the kids," he says. "Sometimes you get a bit of fat for free. sometimes a faint apology and a suggestion to try again next week. You thank him with genuine gratitude. Knowing a good soup bone is the foundation of at least 2 dinners and a handful of desperate lunches. You head home with your modest haul: flour, a sack of potatoes, a can or two, maybe a bruised apple or a surprise jar of pickled beets. The bags are lighter than you'd like, but the sense of accomplishment is heavier than it looks. You mentally plan the week's meals as you walk, slotting ingredients into dishes with all the precision of a master tactician. Bean stew Monday, potato cakes Tuesday, maybe pancakes if you can stretch the eggs and flour far enough. Back home, you unload your treasures onto the table. The family gathers round, inspecting every item with reverence, already placing silent dibs on the choicest bits. You tuck away the government cheese, hide the last of the sugar, and congratulate yourself on another week survived. Because in the Great Depression, the grocery run isn't just about shopping, it's about hope, resilience, and the unbreakable human urge to make a feast out of whatever the world hands you. Sometimes dinner is lean, but the determination? That's always in stock. No food is ever wasted. Leftover oatmeal becomes tomorrow's bread. Stale bread turns into bread pudding, and the definition of casserole expands daily. If you ever wonder who invented hot dish, look for the nearest mother with a wooden spoon and a 1,000-yard stare. Welcome to the Great Depression kitchen, where you're less a cook and more a culinary illusionist. Leftovers are your paint, and survival is your canvas. Every meal starts with an audit of the icebox, if you have one, or, more likely, the windowsill where things are kept fresh by the mercy of the breeze. There's last night's porridge, a half cup of beans, 3 lonely carrots, and what may or may not be ham, depending on the light. You approach your ingredients like an archaeologist on a tight deadline, sifting through scraps for hidden potential. The rules are simple. Nothing gets thrown away. That crust of bread that's gone a bit fossilized, perfect for pudding, soak it in milk, add a dusting of cinnamon if you're feeling extravagant, and call it dessert. The heel of a loaf, too tough for even the dog to gnaw? Slice it thin and toast it for French bread, heavy on the quotation marks. Oatmeal is the real chameleon. Cold and congealed in the morning, it morphs into the backbone of biscuits or bulks out a loaf of bread. There's a running joke that nothing truly leaves the kitchen. It just reincarnates. "What's in the stew?" someone asks, and you give the only honest answer: a little bit of everything, and none of it new. Vegetable scraps become soup base. The water they boiled in is repurposed for gravy. And even the grease from bacon, if you're lucky enough to have had bacon, goes into a jar, ready to flavor tomorrow's beans. Onion skins, carrot tops, potato peels, these aren't waste, they're future seasoning. If you can coax one more bit of flavor from something destined for the compost, you're not just a good housewife, you're practically a wizard. Casserole, meanwhile, isn't a dish, it's a philosophy. Anything can go in. Noodles that broke in the box, last night's mashed potatoes, the final spoonful of gravy, a single chopped up hot dog if you're flush with protein. Mix, bake, and serve with a flourish. Family members are trained to nod approvingly, even if they're not quite sure what they're eating. It's filling, it's hot, and it doesn't taste like despair if you add enough salt. Dessert is a similar exercise in optimism. The banana bread you whipped up uses bananas so blackened they'd be rejected by modern supermarkets on sight. If you're really lucky, a neighbor brings over apples and you whip together a crisp, which, if we're honest, is mostly oats, sugar, and faith. Jelly jars are scraped within an inch of their lives, and every drop of honey is a treasure. Nothing goes down the drain unless it absolutely must. Coffee grounds are sometimes recycled for a second round, and tea leaves find new life, flavoring a pot of rice. Even the water from boiling potatoes becomes soup base, cloudy, starchy, oddly comforting. If something smells off, you give it a hard look and a sniff, maybe a taste, and then decide if it can be masked with onions or cheese. Spoilage is the true enemy, but waste is the cardinal sin. Through all this, you keep up appearances. Every meal is served with a smile and the confidence of a chef presenting haute cuisine, even if you know you just disguised yesterday's disaster as tonight's triumph. You field compliments and complaints with equal grace. If someone says, "This tastes different," you nod and say, "It's a new recipe," and pray they never ask for it again. By the end of the week, the fridge is empty, the pantry bare, but your family is full. Somehow, miraculously, you've spun leftovers into gold. Again, because when survival's at stake, even the smallest scraps can become a miracle. And a housewife's real superpower is never, ever letting them see you sweat unless it's over the stove. Clothes are patched, repatched, and then transformed into rags. Kids grow out of everything faster than you can mend it. And fashion is defined by still has buttons. Shopping for new clothes? Only if you win the lottery, which, in 1933, means you find a forgotten quarter in the couch. The family wardrobe looks less like a closet and more like an archaeological dig. Every garment tells a story, mostly tragic. Overalls with knees reinforced so many times they're practically bulletproof. Socks with more holes than fabric. Dresses that started out as curtains became aprons and finally reached their true calling as dust rags. You inspect each item before laundry day, calculating how many more patches you can add before the thing gives up and dissolves in your hands. Getting dressed is an exercise in compromise. This shirt fits if you don't raise your arms. That sweater is only itchy if you think about it. The shoes have plenty of life left, as long as you don't mind the air conditioning. Every morning you perform triage on the pile of family clothing. Which pants can be let out, which cuffs can be turned up, and which stains are just part of the pattern now. Hand-me-downs are both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, you're grateful for every cousin, neighbor, and anonymous church member who drops off a bundle of mystery clothing at your door. On the other, you have to convince your children that uniquely faded is a real fashion statement, and that room to grow is better than room to breathe. There's a special kind of humiliation reserved for being the third or fourth child to inherit a coat, still bearing the stitched initials of everyone who wore it before. Sundays are especially perilous. That's when the fancy clothes come out, the least threadbare shirts, the best mended socks, the shoes that actually have soles. You gather your family and put on a united front, parading into church like you just stepped off a thrift store runway. You exchange knowing glances with other mothers. Everyone's doing the same dance. If you look closely, you can spot this year's it dress on 3 different girls. Each one slightly shorter than the last. There's an art to patching. You become a surgeon with needle and thread, learning to match not just colors, but eras. The right patch can extend the life of a pair of trousers by 6 months. The wrong one means fielding questions at school about why your son's knees are neon orange. You raid the rag bag for fabric, making sure to save the least stained pieces for future emergencies. When all else fails, you get creative. Belt made from twine, hat fashioned out of an old sweater sleeve, mittens that never quite match but do the job. Eventually, every article of clothing reaches its final destination, the rag bag. But even there, its journey isn't over. Rags become cleaning cloths, dish towels, sometimes even emergency napkins at the dinner table. Nothing is wasted. In a way, you start to admire the resourcefulness. Each piece of cloth gets 3 or 4 lives, serving the family long after the original store tags have faded into legend. Of course, every now and then, someone finds a quarter in a jacket pocket or receives a new dress from a distant relative. There's a moment of pure, unfiltered joy, the kind that comes from slipping into something with no patches, no suspicious stains, and the faintest whiff of possibility. For one glorious day, your child is the height of Depression-era fashion, and you get to bask in the glow of their happiness, however fleeting. By the end of the week, the laundry basket is full, the patch box is empty, and everyone is a little taller and a little more threadbare. But you keep sewing, keep mending, keep reinventing, because in this era, style isn't about what you wear. It's about how many times you can bring it back from the dead and look good doing it. There's no budget for a barber, so the kitchen becomes the salon. Children line up for a turn under the family's one good pair of scissors and a mixing bowl. No one leaves happy, but everyone leaves lighter, especially around the ears. It's haircut day, which means the house is tense. You announce it at breakfast, and immediately the kids scatter like pigeons at a fireworks show. No one volunteers to go first. The bravest is either the one with the least hair left, or the one with a hope that this time, just this once, you'll get it right. Spoiler alert, you won't, but you do your best. The kitchen transforms into a beauty parlor with the ambiance of a barn raising. You sweep the floor, pull out the straight-backed chair, the hot seat, and set up your supplies, dull scissors, the ceremonial mixing bowl, and, for atmosphere, a towel so threadbare it doubles as a window curtain when not in use. Someone tries to sneak in a comic book for distraction. You consider blindfolds. First up, the bowl cut. An American classic, not for reasons of fashion but for reasons of necessity. You center the mixing bowl on your child's head with the seriousness of a master sculptor about to begin their life's work. There's some gentle protest. "Mom, do we have to use the big bowl?" To which the answer is always yes. The small bowl is for Sunday gravy. You snip around the rim with all the precision of a sleep-deprived hedge trimmer, lifting the bowl every so often to check your progress. The result is geometrically ambitious. There's always one spot in the back that ends up shorter than intended, and you're forced to even it out, which inevitably means working your way around the entire head again, like a barber possessed by the ghost of symmetry. Eventually, you decide good enough is the new standard of excellence. Hair litters the kitchen floor like a shed from some startled woodland creature. You shake the towel out the back door, sending small tufts of hair floating on the breeze, where they're immediately claimed by birds building nests with questionable taste. Next is the turn of the child with curls, which is a special kind of punishment. Curls hide mistakes until they don't. You comb, you snip, you reassure. "No, I'm not cutting too much, just the ends." And you hope no one looks too closely in the mirror until after lunch. With every snip, you promise them a cookie if they sit still. You never say how big the cookie will be. For the boys, you attempt to fade, which starts as an optimistic experiment and ends as a military recruit special. Your husband sits last, resigned, book in hand, offering only the occasional, "Just don't make it too short this time." You nod gravely and do it anyway. When you're finished, everyone lines up for inspection. There's a lot of awkward smoothing, a few tears, mostly yours, and the general understanding that hats will be worn for the foreseeable future. The oldest reassures the youngest. "Don't worry. It'll grow out by school." Someone mutters, "I hope so." And you all share a laugh, half delirious from the shared trauma. Despite the uneven bangs and the sudden, chilly breeze on everyone's neck, there's a strange sense of accomplishment. You didn't have to spend a dime, and no one got nicked badly. The mixing bowl gets washed and put away, ready to return to its culinary duties. The scissors are stowed in the sewing kit, and the chair is pushed back to the table, now haunted by the ghosts of haircuts past. As everyone drifts off to bed, the kitchen still smells faintly of hair and lye soap. Tomorrow, the children will show off their new looks with a mix of pride and resignation, because in the depression, a bad haircut is just another story to tell. And the hope, as always, is that it'll look better by next week. Packing lunch is an exercise in optimism. Peanut butter if you have it, lard sandwiches if you don't, and an apple if someone's feeling flush. The best lunches are traded at school for something less mysterious. Sometimes, the lunch pail just carries hope and a slice of onion. Each morning, you survey the pantry with the clinical detachment of a seasoned gambler, making bets on what's left and how many lunches it might stretch to. There's stale bread, dry enough to play a convincing stand-in for cardboard, half a jar of peanut butter scraped so clean you can see your reflection, and the odd bit of bacon fat saved from a rare breakfast. In a good week, you might have a handful of apples, or, on special occasions, a bruised banana. Most days, you reach for the trusty fallback. The lard sandwich, seasoned with salt if you're feeling generous, and a side of be grateful. Lunches are packed with the solemnity of a military rationing ceremony. Wax paper is folded and refolded, bread is stacked, and a single apple, if you have one, is cut with the precision of a jeweler. Each wedge inspected and weighed for fairness. There's an art to making nothing look like something. Sometimes you dress up the lard with a sprinkle of sugar or a dab of jam, if you happen to have some from last year's canning session. If there's a cookie left over from Sunday, it's broken into quarters so everyone gets a taste. Lunch pails rattle with the sound of tin spoons, bread crusts, and hope. The kids, expert negotiators, have already memorized which classmates have mothers who splurge on bologna, or whose fathers might work at the bakery and occasionally slip home a leftover roll. School lunches become a miniature stock market, where apple wedges trade up for homemade pickles, and peanut butter is the currency of kings. Lard sandwiches, surprisingly high value on a cold day, especially if you promise a future trade. Sometimes, the best part of lunch is the swap. One child comes home with a new favorite onion sandwich with mustard, learned from a friend whose family comes from somewhere foreign, and suddenly you're fielding requests for more onions in my lunch. Please. You oblige, knowing full well it's less about the taste and more about the thrill of novelty. Some days, the lunch pail is embarrassingly light. You tuck in a slice of bread, a smear of whatever's available, and a note scribbled on the back of a receipt. Eat slowly. I love you. You feel a pang of guilt, but you remind yourself, and your kids, that half the town is doing the same thing. At school, everyone lines up in the cloakroom and quietly checks to see whose lunch looks better, whose is more creative. It's not a contest anyone wants to win. When spring arrives and wild greens pop up in empty lots, you send the kids out to forage, dandelion leaves, wild onions, sorrel, and anything that isn't actively fighting back. Suddenly, lunch includes salad, a rare event that, for a fleeting moment, feels luxurious. The children brag to their friends, "We have fresh greens, even if they're a bit fuzzy and bitter." On rare, magical days, you manage a slice of cheese, a hard-boiled egg, or a leftover piece of cold potato. Those are the lunches the kids remember, the ones that feel like winning the food lottery. They tell stories about it for weeks. Remember when I had an egg? As if it's a family legend. After school, the lunch pails return, usually emptier than when they left. You collect the wrappers, smooth out the wax paper for another round, and listen to the stories of who swapped what, who managed to get a bite of jelly sandwich, and who simply ate the onion and enjoyed it. Every lunch is a triumph of imagination, a testament to ingenuity, and proof that, sometimes, Hunger is best answered with a little creativity and a whole lot of love. The kids all pile into one bed, like a litter of puppies fighting for the warm spot. There are more feet than blankets, and just enough space for petty squabbles. You shush everyone, tuck them in, and pray no one's borrowing the good pillow again. Bedtime during the Great Depression is less of a peaceful winding down and more of a strategic family operation. The evening begins with a frantic search for pajamas, if you're lucky, matching tops and bottoms. Usually, it's a mix of handed-down flannels and old shirts that have seen better decades. Everyone brushes their teeth at the kitchen sink using a tin cup and a communal bar of soap, hoping the icy water shocks them awake just enough to make them sleepy later. You corral the children into the bedroom, which doubles as the playroom, the reading room, and on rainy days, the indoor dodgeball arena. The bed is a patchwork of lumps and creaks, sagging in the middle like it's just as tired as everyone else. Sheets are thin from 100 washings, patched and tucked so many times they could qualify as family heirlooms. Blankets are rationed and redistributed according to a mysterious formula known only to mothers and the most diplomatic of siblings. The battle for prime sleeping real estate begins instantly. The middle of the bed is the most coveted spot. Warmth from both sides, far from the icy draft at the edge and out of range of the dreaded cold feet attack. The oldest claims their spot with the authority of a seasoned general, while the youngest attempts a sneak attack, burrowing under covers and emerging victorious somewhere near a pillow. Arguments erupt. "You took my side. That's my blanket. No, that's my blanket." You deploy gentle threats. If I have to come in there one more time, and everyone temporarily settles down, united only by their desire to avoid parental intervention. The room fills with the sound of whispered conversations and the occasional muffled giggle. Someone always insists on telling a ghost story, usually about a haunted outhouse or a chicken with glowing eyes. Nervous laughter spreads, then fades into yawns. You make one last round, tucking in toes, smoothing hair, and confiscating any contraband marbles, frogs, or emergency snacks hiding under pillows. The night air is brisk, windows are drafty, and there's never quite enough insulation, so everyone huddles together like penguins at the edge of a frozen cliff. There's an unwritten rule about snoring. Deny it if accused, blame it on the dog if possible, and retaliate with a sharp elbow if all else fails. The dog, for the record, sleeps at the foot of the bed, pretending not to notice the commotion and quietly absorbing more than his fair share of the available warmth. Inevitably, the peace is broken by the nocturnal migration of feet. Cold toes seeking a warm patch, legs stretching into forbidden territory. Someone whispers, "Stop hogging the covers," and a short skirmish ensues. Pillows are swapped and bartered, blankets become bargaining chips, and a tenuous truce is reached when everyone realizes that fighting means losing precious minutes of sleep. You retreat to your own bed, or what passes for it, and listen as the chaos slowly subsides. The house creaks, the wind rattles the windows, and in the children's room, the rhythm of sleep takes over. Soon, there's nothing but the sound of gentle breathing and the occasional sleep mumble about stolen covers or the world's worst lard sandwich. Tomorrow, the battle will begin anew, but for now, the house is peaceful. You're grateful for the noise, the mess, and even the endless sibling warfare, because it means everyone is home, safe, and together, piled into a single bed, sharing warmth, dreams, and the comfort of knowing that as long as you have each other, you can survive just about anything. You close your eyes, tuck in your own feet, and let the quiet chaos of bedtime lull you towards sleep. Keeping a house clean is a Sisyphean task when dirt is the main decorating motif. You sweep the floor with a straw broom and realize you're just moving dust from one corner to another. Clean enough is a state of mind, not a physical reality. In Depression-era America, every housewife's battle with dirt is heroic and doomed from the start. Your home doesn't have hardwood floors or tile. It has whatever God and the landlord left behind. The living room flows into the kitchen into the yard. And the yard, by all available evidence, has been staging an invasion for years. Each morning, you take stock of the situation. Muddy footprints crisscross the entryway. Mysterious crumbs form a kind of abstract art under the table, and the wind has delivered yet another batch of dried leaves right into your best corner. Your weapons are simple. The straw broom, worn down from daily combat, is a constant companion. It's more symbolic than effective, but it makes you feel like you're trying. You sweep the dirt toward the door, only for a child or a well-meaning dog to burst in, scattering everything back to where it started. The dustpan is an optimist's tool. It catches maybe half of what you sweep. The rest is left to be rediscovered in tomorrow's cleaning cycle. Cleaning supplies are whatever you can concoct from vinegar, baking soda, and determination. Soap is precious, used only on the dirtiest spots. Everything else is tackled with water, elbow grease, and the hope that if you scrub hard enough, maybe the stains will start to feel guilty and leave on their own. Rags are just yesterday's shirts, cut down and repurposed until there's nothing left but buttons and memories. Furniture is rearranged not for aesthetics, but to cover stains or the growing crack in the floorboards. The family table wobbles from the last time you tried to fix it with a matchbook and a slice of potato. Chairs are wiped down with a wet rag, then covered in an old quilt to hide the wear. Every week, you rotate which part of the house looks presentable and which part is just waiting for spring cleaning. Dusting is an act of pure optimism. You chase the same film of grey from shelf to shelf, sometimes catching it, more often just spreading it into new and interesting patterns. Cobwebs in the corners are good luck until company comes. Then they become a declaration of war. The window panes never truly sparkle, but if you squint from the right angle, you can almost see outside. Sometimes you declare an all-out cleaning campaign, enlisting the children in a flurry of chores. Sweep the porch, shake out the rugs, wash the dog. The house temporarily transforms into a whirlwind of activity. Laughter, groans, and the occasional argument echo off the walls. By the end, everyone is tired, mostly damp, and convinced that dirt is just another member of the family. Of course, the illusion of cleanliness is fleeting. By afternoon, someone tracks in mud. The baby spills something sticky, and the wind rattles the door, flinging in a fresh batch of dust with the kind of enthusiasm you wish you could muster for chores. You sigh, smile, and remind yourself that lived in is a style now, and no one can take that away from you. You learn to measure cleanliness not in spotless floors, but in the small victories: a shiny spoon, a swept porch, a patch of sunlight falling on a reasonably clean corner. You take pride in these little wins and try not to worry about the rest. After all, no one ever starved from a little dust, and if history is written in layers, your house could fill a whole chapter. So you put the broom away, let the wind have the final say, and settle down in your best chair, strategically draped with a freshly laundered rag. Because in the world of Depression-era cleaning, perfection isn't the goal, peace of mind is. And tonight, that's clean enough. A broken chair is fixed with string, a leaky roof with tar paper and hope. Everything is held together by the combined forces of thrift and denial. You become part housewife, part structural engineer, all on zero budget. In Depression America, the concept of just buy a new one might as well be written in ancient Greek. Every household item is on its 9th or 10th life. The kitchen table wobbles. The back door squeaks like it's auditioning for a horror film, and the stove has more missing knobs than a magician's hat. But you don't complain. You improvise. Because in this house, if it can be patched, braced, or tied together with wire, it's still got years ahead of it. Take the chairs, for example. That one with the loose leg, a length of twine, a couple of bent nails, and a prayer to whatever household spirit oversees furniture stability. And it's good as new. Well, new enough. There's always one chair that everyone avoids, claiming it's reserved, when really it's a test of faith and balance. Guests are gently steered toward the sturdier seats, lest the evening's entertainment be provided by a surprise collapse and an apologetic round of lemonade. The roof is a special project, usually reserved for a sunny afternoon or a rainy night when the drip, drip, drip of water landing in a tin pan finally reaches critical annoyance. You climb up, armed with tar paper, scrap wood, and the remnants of last winter's hopes, patching holes with a craftsman's eye and a gambler's optimism. Each new leak is greeted not with despair, but with a resigned, well, that's where the new bucket goes. During storms, you can chart rainfall by the musical arrangement of pots and pans scattered strategically around the living room. Windows are another adventure. If a pane breaks, you replace it with cardboard or a carefully cut piece of plastic, or, if all else fails, a cheerful curtain that really opens up the space. Tape, glue, and a little imagination keep out most of the elements and at least half of the neighborhood's curiosity. Tools are whatever you can scavenge from the bottom of the kitchen drawer. A butter knife doubles as a screwdriver. Pliers substitute for a wrench. And if you need a hammer, there's always a rock that's just the right size. Kids are enlisted for smaller jobs, partly to help, partly because their hands fit into places yours no longer do. They learn early the difference between that'll hold and don't touch it. It's just for show. Socks with holes become dust rags. Old rags become stuffing for pillows. An umbrella with a broken rib? Suddenly it's a sunshade for the garden, or a scarecrow's new accessory. You stitch, glue, and tie your way through the daily breakdowns, convinced that someday all these skills will be in demand again, or at the very least, worthy of a blue ribbon at the county fair. When the plumbing acts up, usually during holidays or when company's coming, you become a waterworks specialist, wrangling with pipes, buckets, and a stack of towels dedicated solely to emergencies. The bathroom floor, already uneven from years of strategic board placements, becomes a landscape of peaks and valleys, where water flows in surprising directions. You take pride in your solutions, no matter how ridiculous they look to outsiders. The patchwork quilt over the couch isn't just for decoration, it's literally holding the cushions in place. The kitchen step stool with the splint is the result of 3 generations' worth of ingenuity, and at least 2 incidents that no one will admit to. At the end of the day, you look around at your handiwork and feel a small surge of satisfaction. The house may groan and sigh, but it stands. Each repair is a story, each patch a victory. You haven't just made do. You've made a home. In an era where buying new is out of reach, you discover that good enough can be beautiful, especially when it's stitched together with love, grit, and a healthy dose of creative denial. When winter sets in, you layer every blanket in the house, stuff the cracks with newspaper, and hope the wind ignores your drafty windows. The family huddles together by the stove, playing guess which body part is numb. Staying warm during a Depression-era winter is a team sport, and the rules are simple. Nobody wins, but you do what you can to keep from freezing. The daily battle begins before dawn, when the frost paints elaborate patterns on the inside of the windows and your breath fogs in the morning air. There's no such thing as central heating, just an old iron stove, a pile of splintery wood, and the collective willpower of the family to resist turning into human popsicles. You start by stoking the fire, coaxing last night's embers into reluctant flames. Kindling is precious, so every scrap is saved. Apple cores, torn-up letters, the remains of last week's grocery list. Firewood is rationed like gold, burned slowly and carefully, with everyone monitoring the supply as if you're fueling the final expedition to the North Pole. On especially cold mornings, You swear the stove is mocking you with its weak, sullen heat. Insulation, as a concept, is mostly wishful thinking. You become an expert in found materials. Newspapers are stuffed in every gap, between the window and the sill, under the doors, in the shoes for good measure. It's not pretty, but the Society for the Appreciation of Home Decor hasn't visited lately, and besides, nothing says luxury like an editorial from 1931 fluttering in the breeze. Every blanket in the house is pressed into service, regardless of size or origin. Crocheted afghans from long-gone aunts, tattered quilts handed down through the family, scratchy wool army surplus throws. If it covers, it's used. Layering becomes an art form. The kids sleep under a mound of fabric so thick they look like fossilized caterpillars, limbs poking out in odd places as they wrestle for the warmest spots. You pile coats on top, just in case. At night, the stove is banked with the last scraps of wood, and everyone gathers in the living room, huddled together in a snuggly heap. The family pet is suddenly the most popular member of the household, radiating heat and tolerating more hugs than any dog or cat rightfully should. There's a quiet competition to see who can keep their feet warm the longest. Whoever loses is sent to fetch more wood, which is, naturally, stored in the coldest part of the house. Drafts are inevitable. No matter how many cracks you block or how tightly you close the doors, icy fingers of wind sneak in, swirling around your ankles and whispering promises of frostbite. Socks are layered too, sometimes 3 pairs deep. Shoes are lined with paper. On the truly frigid nights, you half joke about sleeping in the oven, except nobody laughs. Because it's not that far-fetched. You invent games to distract from the cold. How many newspapers can you stuff into your shirt before you can't move your arms? Who can last the longest without complaining? When the cold seeps too deep, you all crowd together under the thickest blanket, trading body heat and bedtime stories in equal measure. Someone inevitably falls asleep first, snoring contentedly and refusing to relinquish any covers. In the morning, you wake up grateful for any part of yourself that isn't numb. The house is chilly, but the family is still here, tangled up, a bit grumpy, but alive, and, somehow, still laughing. You know that spring will eventually come. Until then, it's blankets, newspapers, and huddling for warmth, a patchwork defense against winter's siege, and a reminder that even in the coldest nights, together is the warmest place to be. Summer means opening every window, fighting for the shadiest spot, and spritzing water on sheets to simulate air conditioning. No one really sleeps, everyone just sweats in solidarity and dreams of the luxury of ice. When the mercury rises in Depression-era America, the rules of survival shift from don't freeze to don't melt. The sun rises early, sneaking in through thin curtains and waking the house with a blast of morning heat. By noon, the walls have absorbed every ounce of sunshine, and the air inside has the texture of soup. Everyone's face shines with the universal glow of perspiration and resignation. Ceiling fans are for department stores and movie theaters, the height of luxury. A mechanical miracle that lives in the collective imagination. At home, you make do with the hand fan, a sacred relic passed around from person to person, a folded newspaper, a palm frond if you're lucky, or a church bulletin from last Sunday, now repurposed for the Lord's other great work. Moving hot air around in a circle. There's a household migration throughout the day, everyone chasing whatever patch of shade the house provides. The kitchen is unbearable by midday, so meals become cold affairs, tomato sandwiches, potato salad, anything you don't have to cook. The stove gets a summer vacation, and you discover just how many ways you can serve canned beans without starting a riot. The kids develop a sixth sense for which floorboards are the coolest. You find them sprawled in the hallway, backs flat against the boards, limbs arranged like crime scene chalk outlines. The family pet claims the best spot by the door, looking more satisfied than anyone else in the house. You make peace with the fact that you're living in a sauna, minus the spa treatments and cucumber water. Windows are propped wide open, screens patched with whatever fabric is handy. Every breath of wind is celebrated like a winning lottery ticket. When the air stands still, you take matters into your own hands, literally. Sheets are dunked in buckets of water, wrung out, and hung in doorways or draped over beds. If you time it right, you can catch a cool shiver just as you're drifting off, only to wake up 10 minutes later, stuck to the sheet like a postage stamp. At night, the real struggle begins. Sleeping is an Olympic event, with points awarded for creativity and endurance. No one wants to be touched, everyone wants the window open, and a heated debate rages over whether it's better to sleep with no covers or just a threadbare sheet. The darkness hums with the sound of crickets, distant radios, and the soft slap of someone fanning themselves with the back of a cereal box. Baths become more frequent, though not for cleanliness, just for relief. You learn to appreciate the sheer pleasure of sticking your feet in a basin of cold water. Sometimes, when it's especially brutal, you haul the whole family outside to sit on the porch steps, passing around slices of cool watermelon and watching fireflies flicker in the sticky twilight. There's a strange camaraderie in the shared misery. Every complaint about the heat is met with a story about an even hotter day, real or imagined. Dreams are filled with visions of ice, tinkling cubes in glasses of lemonade, snowball fights, a breeze cold enough to raise goosebumps. You promise yourself that next summer you'll find a way to save up for a real fan, the kind that plugs into the wall and hums away all night long. Until then, you settle for the comfort of family, the relief of a damp washcloth, and the certain knowledge that this, too, shall pass. Eventually the heat breaks, and you wake to a morning that feels almost crisp. You celebrate with a real breakfast, hot coffee, and a silent vow to never complain about winter again. But deep down, you know that come January, you'll be wishing for just one more warm night, minus the sweat. Children run wild until called in for chores or scolded for wrestling in the onion patch. Parenting is a blend of love, stern words, and the occasional chase with a wooden spoon. No one's ever bored, but everyone's always in trouble. Raising kids during the Great Depression means letting go of the fantasy that your house will ever be quiet, clean, or completely intact. The children burst out the door after breakfast, leaving a wake of overturned chairs, missing shoes, and echoes of laughter or squabbling behind them. You give chase, voice raised just enough to carry over the rooster's crowing. Stay out of the neighbor's garden is your daily anthem, often ignored, rarely obeyed. There's no need for organized entertainment. The world is their playground, and occasionally their disciplinary courtroom. You find them balancing on the back fence, sword fighting with broom handles, and inventing rules for games no adult has ever heard of. Once in a while, you catch them daring each other to eat wild onions, which explains why no one wants to sit next to them at supper. Chores are a vital, if unpopular, part of the family routine. You dole out tasks with the authority of a drill sergeant. Eggs to gather, rugs to beat, laundry to hang. There's always at least one child who vanishes the moment work is mentioned, suddenly needed at a friend's house to help with something important. You learn to count heads before and after chores, just to make sure the herd is still intact. Discipline, in the absence of modern parenting books or timeouts, is direct and effective, usually involving a look, a well-placed word, or, on memorable occasions, the ceremonial brandishing of the wooden spoon. The spoon's true power is psychological. It spends more time perched on the countertop than it does being used, its reputation enough to restore order during the worst kitchen melees. No one is ever truly afraid, except maybe the youngest, who insists the spoon has eyes. Mischief is as common as dust. Socks disappear, Frogs appear in the flower bin, and someone is always just borrowing the good scissors for a science experiment. You sigh, but there's a certain pride in their creativity. At least they're not bored. The garden becomes a battlefield, the clothesline a trapeze, and by nightfall, everyone is covered in grass, stains, dust, and a deep, sunburned satisfaction. Yet, beneath the chaos, there's a steady current of love and learning. You teach responsibility through repetition, kindness through sharing, and patience, mostly by modeling it, even when your last nerve is hanging by a thread. Dinner time is less about food and more about stories. Who caught the biggest grasshopper? Who lost a tooth? Who managed to climb the tallest tree without falling? Laughter rings out, drowning out the sound of bickering, at least for a few minutes. Bedtime is both a relief and a triumph. The kids are bundled up and tucked in, still whispering and giggling as you make your nightly rounds. You inspect the day's collection of scraped knees and mosquito bites, administer dabs of salve, and hand out the last stern warnings of the night. Go to sleep, or tomorrow's chores double. Someone snickers, and you pretend not to notice the smile tugging at your lips. As you sit in the quiet afterward, you reflect on the day's small victories. You kept everyone fed, mostly clean, and marginally civilized. The house is still standing, and so are you. Parenting, in this era, is an act of hope and endurance, of raising wild spirits with nothing but love, determination, and a trusty wooden spoon. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Even in the midst of disaster, you're expected to keep the kids looking neat and your husband's shirt pressed, at least from a distance. Lipstick is a luxury. Rouge is optional. But a good smile is mandatory, especially at church. The battle to look fine in the Great Depression is waged with more grit than glamour. You wake up every morning and take a deep breath, surveying your small, unruly army. The boys are covered in yesterday's dust, and the girls are using rags as hair ribbons, but you don't let that stop you. With the skill of a seasoned general, you assign everyone to stations: hair combing, face washing, teeth scrubbing with baking soda, a splash of cold water, a quick scrub behind the ears, and you step back to inspect your work, squinting, because, in this light, dirt almost looks like a healthy glow. Laundry day sets the rhythm, but stains are a constant companion. You become a connoisseur of camouflage, placing a well-timed patch or pin over a stubborn spot, layering sweaters over shirts with frayed collars, and turning the best side of any garment outward, no matter how much internal mayhem is stitched into the seams. If the hem's coming down, you whip out a safety pin with the flair of a magician. You'd think you were dressing for a parade, not just another Tuesday at the grocer's. For yourself, getting ready is more about deception than transformation. Your beauty arsenal is limited to a stub of lipstick, carefully rationed for Sundays and funerals. Maybe a hint of homemade rouge, beet juice if you're lucky, flour for powder if you're not. You pinch your cheeks for color and bite your lips for a hint of pink. Your hair is set in rag curls overnight, held in place by hope and a borrowed scarf. If you look in the mirror and can honestly say, well, that's not terrifying, you count it as a win. The real challenge comes on Sunday. Church is less a house of worship and more a runway for local fashion and local judgment. You iron your husband's shirt, pressing it flat with a heavy iron heated on the stove, praying it holds its shape until at least the second hymn. You convince the children to tuck in their shirts and brush their hair flat, threatening to deploy the dreaded spit on the hand trick if they protest too much. Shoes are buffed with lard for a fleeting shine. Stockings are mended with careful darning and a silent plea that no one inspects too closely. Walking to church, you keep your chin up and smile at neighbors, exchanging greetings and sizing up the state of each other's repairs. The air is thick with silent competition. Who found the best hand-me-down? whose dress looks the least like it was pieced together in the dark. You hope no one notices the mismatched buttons or the spot of ink on your skirt. Deep down, you know they're hoping the same thing about you. At home, you keep a jar of cold cream on the windowsill, mostly for show, partly for hope. You let the children play outside but call them in for a wash before anyone important drops by. Every visit is a reminder that pride matters, even when money is short. You don't have much, but you make the most of it, patching up clothes, spirits, and reputations with the same threadbare patience. In the end, looking fine isn't about perfection, it's about effort and the gentle illusion of order. You master the art of presenting your family to the world as clean, proud, and cared for, even if the seams are straining and the smiles are stitched on just as tightly as the patches. Because sometimes, all anyone really needs is a little polish and the courage to keep showing up, one pressed shirt and painted-on smile at a time. Neighbors become lifelines. You borrow sugar, swap stories, and pass down advice. The grapevine is alive and well, and nothing travels faster than a juicy rumor, except maybe someone's missing pie. In the world of Depression-era survival, no one makes it alone. The moment you move in, or, more likely, when someone in your house yells too loudly about running out of flour, the neighborhood takes note. Soon, you're part of a living, breathing barter economy, where the currency is not cash, but favors, secrets, and the occasional cup of whatever you've got extra. It starts simply. You need a cup of sugar, and Mrs. Bennett across the street needs a handful of coffee grounds. You trade with a solemn nod, each understanding that the favor will be returned eventually, or maybe in another form. You lend your only rolling pin, knowing you'll get it back with a story about how it rolled out more arguments than dough. When your husband's work pants rip, the neighbor's daughter appears with a needle, a patch, and 3 new tales about the family 3 doors down. Front porches become the local stock exchange. Goods, news, and parenting advice all traded with equal intensity. Mrs. Hudson offers extra carrots from her garden. You counter with a jar of last summer's preserves. If someone manages to bring home a bag of oranges, it's enough to start a neighborhood summit. Everyone crowding around for a slice and a status update on who's courting who's expecting, and who just might be hiding a radio from the authorities. Gossip travels on the wind, carried in laundry lines and passed over picket fences. You learn not just who's up to what, but how to stretch a stew, mend a pair of shoes, or talk sense into a stubborn child. Wisdom is dispensed freely. Add a little vinegar, it'll clean anything. Let the bread rise near the stove, and it'll bake with more heart. If your husband's acting distant, bake him a pie or ask him to chop wood. Both will get results. No good deed goes unremarked. If someone's roof springs a leak, half the block turns up with spare shingles, tar, and enough advice to write a novel. Someone's baby falls ill, and casseroles appear on the porch before you've even boiled the kettle. You accept the help, humbled and grateful, promising yourself to return the kindness once you can. The ledger of community is never fully balanced, but no one's keeping score. Then there's the pie incident. 1 minute, there's a cooling apple pie on your windowsill. The next, it's vanished without a trace. Children are interrogated, dogs are cross-examined, and the neighborhood hums with speculation. The pie's fate becomes legend, a tale retold at every gathering, growing taller with each telling. Eventually, a mysterious pie appears on your porch. No note, just a silent nod to the unsolved caper and the ongoing game of give and take. You find that the real luxury isn't sugar or coffee, but belonging. When someone falls on hard times, loses a job, faces a loss, or just needs an extra set of hands, the community rises up, quietly and without fanfare, Laundry is done, children are watched, errands are run, and sorrow is shared until it's lighter. In a world that offers little in the way of guarantees, this patchwork safety net is everything. As you tuck the kids into bed, the glow from the neighbor's kitchen flickers across the yard. Somewhere, a door slams, a baby cries, and laughter drifts through the night air. You know tomorrow will bring new challenges and new trades. Maybe flour for advice. Maybe news for help with the garden. Whatever it is, you'll meet it together. Because in the end, the power of community is knowing you're never really alone. Not when you have a village of allies, a grapevine of news, and the ever-present possibility that your missing pie will one day find its way back home. Church isn't just about religion. It's a social event, a place to swap recipes, and sometimes the only day you see people in shoes. Potlucks mean every dish is a surprise, and nobody leaves hungry or completely sure what they ate. Sunday morning in Depression America is a production. The whole house is up early, scrambling through the ritual of getting cleaned up, which mostly involves scrubbing behind ears and finding the least patched clothing. Shoes are buffed to a questionable shine. Stockings are mended and remended, and the last bits of your best lipstick are rationed for the occasion. Children are brushed, combed, and lined up for inspection. The oldest are threatened with extra chores if they come home muddy. The youngest are bribed to keep their socks on until after the closing hymn. Walking to church is its own kind of procession. You join the steady stream of neighbors making their way down dusty roads and sidewalks, all heading for the same steepled destination. You exchange nods and good mornings, all the while surveying whose hem is holding up and whose dress has made the latest round through the hand-me-down circuit. It's the day when everyone puts their best face forward, no matter what's hiding under the patches. The church service itself is a blend of reverence and restless energy. Children wiggle and fidget, adults sing and pray, and the preacher delivers a sermon equal parts hope, fire, and gentle reminders about neighborly duties. As the organ plays, you're surrounded by the familiar faces of your village. The same faces you borrow sugar from and lend your rolling pin to, all gathered together in the shared comfort of tradition. But if we're honest, the real anticipation is for what comes after, the potluck. The fellowship hall is a wonderland of smells, savory, sweet, and sometimes mysterious. The long tables groan under the weight of Depression-era ingenuity. There are casseroles filled with questionable meats, loaves of bread made with whatever flour could be spared, jars of pickles, and cakes topped with whatever fruit wasn't claimed by the birds. Every dish has a story. That's Mrs. Green's infamous carrot loaf. Someone whispers, eyeing it with awe and fear. Try the apple brown Betty before it's gone. It's made with actual apples this time. The children circle like hungry hawks, loading their plates and then negotiating trades. One slice of pie for 2 deviled eggs, a spoonful of beans for a cookie. Adults hover, pretending to be dignified while quietly keeping tabs on who brought what and who's going back for thirds. The newcomers are welcomed with extra helpings and extra gossip. Potluck is the great equalizer, where everyone is invited and everyone is subject to culinary experimentation. After plates are cleared and the last crumbs swept away, the conversation shifts to community business. Who needs help with a barn raising? Who's expecting or just hoping, and whose rooster has been waking up the neighborhood at ungodly hours? Recipe cards are swapped, compliments are handed out like prizes, and there's a moment of collective satisfaction. Bellies full, spirits lifted, worries kept at bay for one more afternoon. As the sun starts to dip, families gather their empty dishes and tired children. Shoes are traded for bare feet, ties are loosened, and everyone strolls home a little slower, savoring the peace that only comes from a full table and good company. You look back at the steeple, grateful for another Sunday survived, another week ready to begin. Because in the hardest times, faith and fellowship aren't just traditions, they're lifelines. stitched together with potluck casseroles, quiet prayers, and the steady reassurance that no matter how lean the cupboards, the table will always hold enough. The doctor is a luxury, so you make do with vinegar compresses, mustard plasters, and a Bible verse or two. Cough? Try honey. Fever? Try more honey. Existential dread? Not covered by your insurance, sorry. In the era of the Great Depression, every kitchen becomes an apothecary, every mother an honorary nurse, and every illness a chance for homegrown ingenuity. The medicine cabinet is a chaotic wonderland. Jars of mentholated salve, bottles of vinegar, ancient tins of baking soda, and maybe a mysterious jar of something pickled that no one remembers putting there. Aspirin, if you have it, is hoarded like gold. Everything else is faith, either in your concoctions or in the hope that time and a good nap will cure all. Sniffles are the daily bread of childhood, and for each there's a time-tested remedy. Out comes the Vicks, slathered on chests, dabbed under noses, and occasionally, by accident or creative desperation, spread on toast. Not recommended, but apparently survivable. Sore throats call for hot water, honey, and lemon, or, lacking lemons, a sympathetic look and an extra blanket. For coughs that won't quit, there's always onion syrup, which tastes exactly as bad as it sounds and works mostly by frightening the illness into submission. Fever turns the house into a hub of activity. Sheets are changed, vinegar compresses are applied, and there's an unspoken contest to see who can remember the most home remedies from childhood. Wrap the feet in onions, tie a red string around the finger, pray over a potato and put it under the pillow. You try them all, partly because you're desperate, partly because it keeps the patient entertained and everyone else out of trouble. Someone's always running to the kitchen for fresh water, another round of tea, or the special spoon reserved for taking medicine. Stomachaches are handled with bland foods, ginger, and the kind of patience that would impress a saint. For more mysterious ailments, you consult the Tattered Family Medical Guide, which suggests everything from castor oil to long walks in fresh air. If all else fails, you send the afflicted child out to play, and hope that a good mud pie and a dash of distraction will do the trick. Superstition seeps into every crevice. The neighbor swears by mustard plasters, guaranteed to draw out whatever ails you. You try it, only to spend the next hour negotiating with a child whose chest is now bright pink and smells like a sandwich. You tell stories of distant relatives who cured the flu with garlic necklaces and saltwater gargles, mostly as a way to distract from the lack of real medicine. In the evenings, you light a candle and say a quiet prayer. Not entirely sure who you're praying to, but convinced it can't hurt. In moments of real crisis, broken bones, high fevers, coughs that rattle the rafters, you gather your courage and walk to fetch the doctor, knowing the bill will sting almost as much as the illness. Until then, you lean on home remedies and the comfort of family. Cool cloths on hot foreheads, soft songs sung by tired voices, and the gentle hands that hold you together when nothing else seems to work. Somehow, most recover. They rise from bed, a little thinner, maybe a little wiser, always with a new story about the time they survived on vinegar and hope. You add the experience to your mental catalogue of cures, ready for the next round of sneezes, sniffles, and mysterious aches. Because in the end, healing is a community affair, equal parts superstition, kitchen science, and relentless optimism. It's the reminder that, even in the hardest times, there's always something to be done, someone to be cared for, and always, always a remedy for whatever ails you, even if it's just a spoonful of honey and a mother's hug. No electronics, no fancy toys, just imagination and whatever isn't nailed down. You fashion dolls out of rags, cars out of empty cans, and fun out of hard labor. Somehow, no one seems to mind. Keeping children entertained in the Depression era is an exercise in pure resourcefulness and a little bit of mischief. If it isn't nailed down, it's fair game. The toy chest is really a repurposed crate holding everything from chipped marbles to mismatched buttons. You've got dolls stitched together from old socks and yarn, cars made from tin cans and bottle caps, and jump ropes braided from the elastic that surrendered in someone's last good pair of underwear. The backyard is a wonderland of potential. Sticks become swords, tree branches become horses, and an abandoned wheel transforms into the world's most thrilling racetrack. You step outside to find the children absorbed in a dirt-based board game whose rules change every few minutes, refereed by whoever shouts loudest. There's always at least one child wearing a cape that started the morning as your best dish towel. When it rains, the house itself becomes a playground. Pillows are stacked into castles. Chairs form obstacle courses. And the entire living room is commandeered for the world's slowest, most dangerous foot race. Old sheets draped over the table turn the kitchen into a secret cave, where meetings are held and alliances are forged over stolen cookies and whispered plans for future mischief. Creativity thrives on scarcity. Every bit of string, spare button, and shiny stone finds a purpose. Paper dolls are cut from mail-order catalogues, each new outfit lovingly colored with the stub of a borrowed pencil. Board games are hand-drawn on the back of cereal boxes, the pieces scavenged from whatever happens to be nearby. A dried bean, a thimble, a broken crayon. The winner gets bragging rights and, if you're feeling generous, the last cookie crumb. You become an accidental toy inventor, constantly approached with the urgent plea, "Mama, can you fix this?" A limp rag doll needs new arms. The tin can racer needs another wheel. The sock puppet could use a new button eye. You patch, sew, and glue, knowing full well it will be improved by your kid's own modifications within the hour. If all else fails, there's always the timeless game of let's see who can be the quietest, which is, predictably, never popular. Sometimes, fun and chores blend together. The kids turn laundry day into a contest. Who can wring out the most socks? Who can hang the fastest? Who can balance on one foot while folding a towel? Garden work transforms into bug catching, and trips to the well are races with imaginary consequences. The best games are the ones made up on the spot, mud pies with carefully arranged toppings, stickball in the alley with rules that only make sense if you're under 12. You don't worry about boredom, there's always something to do, and, failing that, a parent nearby ready to assign a chore for anyone foolish enough to say the words, "I'm bored." There's a kind of magic in the simplicity. No batteries, no instructions, just play. Arguments flare and fade with the speed of summer thunderstorms. Friendships tested and mended in the same afternoon. At the end of the day, the children return home, faces streaked with dust, pockets brimming with new treasures. You gather up their handmade toys, dented, mismatched, and cherished beyond all reason, and tuck them away for tomorrow's adventures. As they drift off to sleep, you realize that, somehow, you've given them something more valuable than store-bought fun. You've given them memories built from imagination, shared struggle, and the simple joy of making something out of almost nothing, and for a moment, it feels like enough. Victory gardens are less about patriotism and more about hunger. Every inch of yard becomes a vegetable patch. Every child becomes a weeder. And the neighborhood rabbit is suddenly public enemy number one. The family garden isn't a hobby. It's a matter of daily survival. You stand at the back door, hands on your hips, and survey your patch of earth with the critical eye of a general preparing for battle. What once was lawn is now a checkerboard of bean poles, sagging rows of carrots, and the stubborn green flags of potato plants. Anything that grows gets a chance. Anything that doesn't gets yanked out and replaced with something hardier. No space is wasted. The side of the house? Cabbage? The strip by the fence? Radishes, of questionable motivation. Even the old wash tub by the porch finds new life as a home for lettuce. You become fluent in the language of seed packets, early, late, cold-hardy, drought-tolerant. The arrival of spring catalogs sends a thrill through the house, though you mostly just circle what you'd grow if you had the luxury. The children are recruited into the cause with the promise of fresh corn and the threat of extra dish duty. Little hands are perfect for thinning seedlings, hunting for slugs, and shooing away any rabbit that so much as glances at your peas. Gardening isn't the tranquil, meditative pastime promised by magazine covers. It's a full-contact sport. There's the endless war with weeds, which always seem to grow twice as fast as the actual vegetables. You crouch in the sun, fingers caked with mud, muttering under your breath at the dandelions that mock you from every row. Rain is both a blessing and a curse. Too little and everything wilts. Too much, and you're bailing out the tomato patch with a coffee can. You develop a sixth sense for pests. The rabbit is your sworn nemesis, a fluffy outlaw who stages midnight raids on the bean rows and disappears before dawn. The children mount nighttime patrols, wielding flashlights and clanging pans. But the rabbit is always one hop ahead. Birds pick at the strawberries, beetles invade the cabbage, and the dog, who was meant to be a deterrent, spends most of his time napping in the shade, oblivious to the vegetable carnage. Despite the setbacks, miracles do happen. Tiny green shoots push through the dirt, and you feel a surge of pride every time a squash flower blooms or a row of peas stands at attention. You harvest with reverence, lining up misshapen carrots, fist-sized potatoes, and the occasional zucchini so large it looks like it could run for mayor. Meals are built around whatever's ripe. There are weeks when you eat so many beans you start to dream in green. But it's food, and it's yours, grown with effort, spit, and a kind of stubborn hope. Summer evenings find the whole family in the garden, baskets in hand, picking, pulling, and debating whose tomato is the biggest. There's laughter, complaining, and a quiet pride that comes from coaxing dinner from dirt. Neighbors swap surplus, cucumbers for onions, tomatoes for squash, and pass along gardening wisdom disguised as gossip. Try planting marigolds to keep away the beetles, or singing to the beans if you want a bigger crop. You nod, pretending to believe, and try it anyway. At this point, you'll try anything. As the sun sets and the crickets start their chorus, you carry the day's harvest inside. Arms full, heart full, the kitchen fills with the smells of earth and victory, however humble. The family gathers around the table, and for one meal at least, the depression is kept at bay by a handful of potatoes and the promise of more where that came from. In the end, the garden isn't just a plot of vegetables. It's a patch of hope in a world that sorely needs it. You spend all summer sweating over boiling jars, praying the seals hold. Canned peaches, pickled beans, and whatever's in that mysterious jar at the back, each one a small, sticky miracle against winter's hunger. Preserving food in the depression isn't a hobby. It's a marathon that begins with spring's first strawberry and ends somewhere around the day the kitchen smells more like vinegar than home. You scan the garden for ripeness every morning, clutching your battered colander like it's a lottery ticket. The moment something is ready, you rally the troops. Children are conscripted as pickers, peelers, stirrers, and, if they're old enough, notorious jar-dropper avoiders. No berry, bean, or beet escapes the call to the canning kettle. The process is a kind of domestic science experiment. Part alchemy, part exercise in risk management. The kitchen transforms into a steam bath laboratory. Enormous pots bubble and hiss, lids rattle, and clouds of sugary syrup or brine float in the humid air. Every surface is sticky. Every towel is stained. Someone is always shouting, "Don't touch that, it's hot," while someone else is, inevitably, touching that. Timing is everything. Too early, and the fruit is tart enough to pucker a statue. Too late, and you're battling swarms of fruit flies with nothing but a wooden spoon and prayers. You slice, pit, and blanch with the practiced speed of someone who knows winter's coming and will judge you for every wasted peach. The stove is never truly off. Day after day, you stand over its heat, dripping sweat into the pickle brine, wondering if this is how superheroes are forged. The jars themselves are a motley crew, some inherited, some scavenged, all precious. Each one is checked, double-checked, and, if you're superstitious, triple-checked for cracks. Lids and rings are boiled, arranged like the shiny trophies they are, because a failed seal means lost food. And in this era, every peach counts. You ladle hot preserves into waiting jars, fingers crossed, muttering old family blessings or curses at the stubborn ones that just refuse to close tight. As the jars cool, the house fills with the soft, musical pops of sealing lids, a sound more satisfying than a symphony, more relieving than payday. You line up each successful jar on the windowsill with a sense of pride that's hard to explain to anyone who's never counted their dinners in rows of glass. There's a growing army of preserves. Peaches glowing like little suns, beets stacked like marbles, green beans standing at attention. Some jars look suspicious, a bit cloudy, a little too pink, an unidentifiable object floating near the bottom. But you keep them anyway. Mystery is part of the winter menu. Every shelf in the pantry, every spare inch under the bed or in the cellar, becomes real estate for canned goods. You admire your stash like a dragon counting gold. Neighbors compare notes on new recipes, clever tricks, and infamous disasters. Remember the batch that exploded? Try my new pickle brine, it'll curl your hair. Don't trust anything Aunt Millie gives you. She labels everything fruit and hopes for the best. When winter comes and fresh produce is a distant memory, you pop the lid on a jar of peaches and are instantly transported back to August sunlight. Even a modest meal becomes a celebration when you can add bright jam to stale bread or a spoonful of tangy relish to tired beans. The preserved bounty becomes insurance against lean times, a buffer between hunger and hope. In the end, canning is less about jars and more about peace of mind. It's a little bit of summer on a cold night, the taste of work well done, and the knowledge that you faced the season's uncertainty with sugar, vinegar, and relentless determination. Each jar is a small victory, sealed, stacked, and ready for whatever tomorrow brings. Your husband trudges home after another fruitless job search, carrying disappointment and sawdust. The conversation is gentle, the support mutual, and the understanding that sometimes a walk around the block is just code for finding a drink. The men in Depression America carry their own particular brand of weight, the kind you can't see, but you feel every time they let out a heavy sigh at the end of the day. Their hands are rough, their backs are tired, and their pockets seem to grow holes faster than they find coins. Jobs are like mirages. You chase one all the way across town, only to arrive and find a line already halfway to next Thursday. It's not laziness, it's math. There are just too many hungry mouths and not nearly enough full plates. Homecomings are quiet, stripped of the bravado they might have carried in better years. There's no need for grand speeches. Instead, your husband kicks off his worn boots by the door, dusts off his jacket, and settles in at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. Sometimes, the children are the only ones who can crack a smile out of him, a tug on his sleeve, a silly story, a lopsided drawing slipped into his hand. You learn to read the mood by the slump of his shoulders or the way he stares at the fire. You keep dinner warm and the conversation warmer, tiptoeing around the rough patches with practiced care. There are words you both avoid: foreclosure, relief office, cutbacks, but the silence between them is filled with the unspoken promise that you're in this together. There's no playbook for what to say. Sometimes, he talks about the odd jobs he did pick up: hauling lumber, fixing a neighbor's fence, splitting kindling for a widow up the road. The pay is usually a meal and a handshake. Sometimes, it's just the handshake. Still, every penny counts, every scrap of work is a victory, and you tally it all up with the solemnity of a banker balancing the national debt. Other days, he announces he's going for a walk, just a stroll around the block. Nothing special. You both know the code. Maybe he's visiting a friend who's got a radio, or heading down to the church basement where someone's organized a penny poker game. Maybe, just maybe, he'll find his way to the speakeasy hidden behind the tailors, where the whiskey is cheap, the talk is cheaper, and, for a few hours, everyone can pretend the world outside doesn't exist. You don't ask questions. Everyone's allowed a small escape, especially when reality is so relentless. The neighborhood men share a silent brotherhood. On good days, they swap stories about better times and the little victories of the week. A chicken that finally laid an egg, a neighbor who landed steady work with the WPA, a son who brought home a perfect report card. On the harder days, they commiserate without judgment, offering up cigarettes, hard candy, and old jokes that have been worn as thin as their shoe soles. Sometimes, a single hat is passed for a friend in need. No explanations required. Despite the challenges, you notice how your husband tries, fixing things around the house, keeping spirits up, even if it's just with a mumbled, "It'll get better." He does what he can, and you do what you must, holding up your ends of the invisible bargain that makes a family a family. You don't ask for more. You just quietly appreciate the moments when he catches your eye across the dinner table, manages a wry smile, and reminds you, in his own quiet way, that tomorrow is a new day. And so the menfolk endure, supporting, surviving, and sometimes vanishing for an hour or two, only to return with the resolve, if not the means, to try again. In the hardest times, it isn't strength or swagger that keeps them going. It's love, stubbornness, and the kind of hope you don't need to say out loud. There are days when holding it all together feels impossible. Tears are shed in silence, hope is rationed, and laughter is sometimes the only medicine. You put on a brave face because falling apart isn't an option, not when everyone's watching. No one in the Great Depression talks about mental health, at least not in so many words. There are nerves, spells, moods that settle like dust and refuse to budge. You don't have a therapist on speed dial. You have a kettle, a trusted friend across the fence, and a back porch where you can stare at the sky and wonder how it all got so heavy. Still, you keep going, because what's the alternative? The family's counting on you, and so is the neighbor who needs your pie crust recipe, and the children who don't quite understand but know enough to squeeze your hand a little tighter on the hard days. Every morning, you put on your everything's fine uniform, hair brushed, apron tied, smile almost convincing. You tell jokes at the breakfast table and threaten wooden spoon justice with extra flourish, letting the laughter fill in the cracks. You invent reasons to gather everyone in the same room, singing around the radio, peeling potatoes together, sharing stories that are half memory, half myth. It helps. Not enough, maybe, but just enough. Grief comes in waves, over what's lost, what never was, what might never be. You find yourself teary-eyed over a broken jar or a letter from a cousin you haven't seen in years. Sometimes it's exhaustion that floors you. Other times, it's just the relentless sameness of hardship. When it gets to be too much, you steal a moment alone, the world's shortest vacation, sitting on the back steps, eyes closed, breathing in the evening air. No one interrupts, everyone knows. The women in your circle keep their own secrets. You swap recipes and remedies, but you also share gentle confessions. How sometimes you snap at the kids or lose patience with a husband whose silence is as heavy as your worry. "I just wanted to scream," one friend says quietly, and everyone nods, relief flickering in their eyes. You offer each other what you can. A fresh loaf of bread, a cup of coffee, a safe place to grumble, knowing tomorrow you'll need to lean on them in return. Laughter is your best tool. It doesn't fix anything, but it buys you time. You laugh at the biscuits that come out flat, at the dog who eats the laundry, at the husband who can't find his socks in a two-room house. It's not denial, it's survival. You teach your children the same trick. Encouraging silliness, celebrating small victories, and letting the bad days pass like storms. You don't shield them from everything, but you do your best to let hope sneak through, even if it's only as a joke about the world's worst soup. When the day ends and the house finally quiets, you let yourself feel it all. Maybe you cry. Maybe you just sit in the silence, too tired to even think. But you also count your blessings, a roof that mostly holds, a child's arm around your waist, the possibility that tomorrow will be just a bit better. You remind yourself that you are not alone, not really, even if it sometimes feels that way. Holding it together is an act of daily heroism that no one ever awards a medal for. You keep going not because you're unbreakable, but because you're needed. And because somewhere, deep down, you still believe that spring always follows the hardest winter, and sometimes that's all it takes. Somehow, even in the bleakest moments, there's still room for birthdays, anniversaries, and the occasional surprise pie. Joy comes from the little things. A joke, a hug, a rare treat from the store. You celebrate surviving, and that, in itself, is a win. Special occasions don't get cancelled just because times are hard. They simply adapt, shrinking to fit the cupboard and stretching to fill the heart. Birthdays are no longer about mountains of presents or layer cakes stacked high with frosting. Instead, you mark the day with an extra spoonful of jam, a hand-drawn card, and a chorus of off-key singing that rattles the windows and draws a smile even from the neighbors. Everyone pitches in, even the youngest, whose idea of a gift is a rock shaped vaguely like a chicken, presented with enormous pride. Anniversaries are equally humble and just as sweet. Maybe you tuck a flower behind your ear, or pull out the fancy teacups, the ones that only leak a little if you keep your thumb over the crack. You trade silly poems or love notes scrawled on the backs of grocery receipts, recalling the days when you could afford real presents, but knowing that the words mean more than anything you could buy. There's a shared glance across the dinner table, a wink, the gentle brushing of hands in the kitchen. A reminder that partnership is about weathering the storms, not waiting for sunny days. When a rare windfall comes, a few extra eggs, a neighbor's surplus apples, or the miracle of a little extra sugar, you seize the moment. Suddenly, it's pie for supper, and the house fills with the smell of baking and anticipation. The family gathers round, eyes shining, as the first slice is cut. There's a hush as the pie is tasted, too tart maybe, or the crust a bit tough, but none of that matters. It's celebration enough just to have a surprise. Holidays are an exercise in both nostalgia and invention. You string together decorations from whatever's on hand, paper chains made from newspaper, bouquets of wildflowers plucked from the roadside, or a tree branch dressed up for Christmas with scraps of colored cloth and bits of foil. Gifts are homemade, knitted potholders, hand-sewn dolls, a scarf that took all winter to finish. If there's chocolate, it's divided with mathematical precision, savored in tiny bites, and remembered for months. Joy, in this world, is elastic. It finds its way into morning sunlight and the crackling of the radio on a Sunday afternoon. It's present in shared laughter over a dinner that was almost a disaster, in the warmth of bodies huddled together on a cold night, and in the feeling of bare feet on cool grass after a summer rain. The children run wild in the yard, turning a cardboard box into a fort, a stick into a sword, and a pile of rags into a treasure hoard. Their imaginations fill in every gap, making up for anything that's missing. Sometimes, you celebrate just making it through another day. No disasters. No one sick, no leaks in the roof you couldn't patch. You count your silver linings before sleep, a pantry that isn't empty, a family gathered around the table, neighbors who wave and smile, and a community that shares both the burdens and the blessings. The candle on the cake may be borrowed, but the wishes are real, whispered in the darkness, and carried, somehow, into tomorrow. Because in the end, joy is never about having everything. It's about noticing what you have, holding it close, and letting it shine, no matter how small or fleeting it seems. And that, truly, is worth celebrating. Evenings mean gathering around the family radio. If you're lucky enough to have one that mostly works, static crackles through the living room as everyone leans in, straining to catch the latest drama or baseball scores. For 30 glorious minutes, you're transported far away from chipped wallpaper and empty cupboards, straight into the world of soap operas, Roosevelt's fireside chats, and news that sometimes feels only slightly less bleak than your own. The family radio is both treasure and oracle. A humming, glowing box that holds the promise of a world beyond your own. It doesn't matter that it takes 5 minutes of careful knob fiddling to tune in your favorite program, or that a strategically placed butter knife is the only thing keeping the antenna upright. When that little orange dial glows, the whole house hushes with anticipation. The children pile in, knees and elbows everywhere, while the adults claim the best spots closest to the speaker. Even the family pet stakes out a place on the rug, hoping for crumbs from the snack plate and the comfort of voices from afar. Listening is a ritual. Someone, usually the youngest, gets the honor of turning the radio on, standing by, just in case the set emits a suspicious whine. Static fills the room at first, a white noise symphony that somehow makes the house feel cozier. You lean in, holding your breath, until the station crackles into focus. Sometimes you land on a soap opera, overwrought sighs, mysterious disappearances, and evil twins all delivered in velvety tones. Other nights, it's a thrilling serial about masked heroes and villains, the announcer's voice rising and falling with each cliffhanger. Roosevelt's fireside chats are a family favorite, not for their excitement but for their steadiness. Everyone listens, even the children, to the familiar cadence, comfort in a world where even tomorrow feels unpredictable. Sometimes, you catch the news. Headlines roll out in brisk, serious voices. You hear about distant disasters, remarkable victories, or the latest developments in faraway cities. The news isn't always good, but it reminds you that the world is still spinning, even when your own corner feels stuck. Music Hour is a gift. You sway to big band tunes and jazz, your feet tapping out rhythms on the scuffed floor. Children spin in dizzy circles. For a little while, the kitchen becomes a ballroom, your worries pushed aside by trumpets and crooning voices. The radio blurs the line between have and have not. Everyone, for those 30 minutes, gets to feel like a part of something bigger and brighter. Commercials are their own kind of entertainment. You marvel at promises of miracle tonics and labor-saving gadgets, half wishing for a bottle of Ovaltine or a new soap that makes dishes clean themselves. Sometimes, the family joins in, creating mock advertisements for the newest product made from leftover beans or a revolutionary potato peeler that's just the regular one with a little more attitude. When the program ends, there's a lingering sense of togetherness. You share reactions, outrage at a plot twist, hope for a happy ending, relief at the president's steady voice. The youngest reenacts the night's adventure, pretending to be a detective or a daring aviatrix, while the adults stretch, smile, and tuck away the brief escape like a warm ember for the next cold night. Eventually, you switch the radio off, the silence of the house settling back in. Dishes are washed, teeth are brushed, and children are ushered to bed with stories borrowed from the broadcast. Tomorrow, reality will still be waiting. But for tonight, you've traveled beyond your four walls, together, through static and imagination, on wings of sound. Because sometimes, all you need to keep hope alive is a little music, a lot of noise, and the belief that, somewhere out there, someone else is listening too. The only thing more reliable than the bills is the weather's knack for choosing the worst possible moment. Rain pounds against the patched roof, trickling through ancient leaks into pots and pans strategically scattered around the house. Every thunderclap is a reminder that the only thing thinner than the roof is your patience. But still, you hustle to move furniture, mop puddles, and laugh so you don't cry. In Depression America, storms are less an act of God and more a test of household engineering. The forecast is always mostly cloudy, with a chance of regret. The first drops send you into action, collecting every available pot, pan, and, when you run out of cookware, anything that vaguely resembles a bucket. You know the drill. There's the reliable drip by the pantry, the persistent leak right over the good chair, and the mysterious new spot that changes location like a mischievous spirit. You work by the light of flickering lamps, because if the storm knocks out the power, you'll need every candle stub in the house. Lightning flashes, illuminating your living room like a haunted house, and the kids shriek and laugh in equal measure. There's an unspoken family contest. Who can spot the first drip? Who can catch the rain before it hits the floor? And who will be the first to declare it's just character as water seeps down the wallpaper? Furniture is shoved into the driest corners, and blankets are sacrificed to soak up surprise puddles. You slap towels under doors and wedge newspapers into window frames, trying to outwit the wind. For a few minutes, everyone works together, forming a soggy but determined brigade. If the dog starts barking, it means the back porch is flooding again, and you're suddenly ankle-deep in water, holding onto your patience with both hands. Of course, no storm is complete without a round of basement roulette. Someone is dispatched to check for rising water, flashlight in hand, ready to report back on whether the furnace has finally learned how to swim. There's usually a heroic effort to bail out the worst of it with a dented saucepan and an old milk jug, all while offering color commentary on the family's flood resilience plan, which mostly consists of hope for the best, mop up the rest. Sometimes, the only thing keeping spirits up is your running dialogue of jokes and dry commentary. At least, it's not raining indoors. Oh, wait. You dream up inventions like the family raincoat, a single tarp big enough for everyone to huddle under until the clouds give up. The kids are in high spirits, turning storm prep into a game, racing each other to the next leak and naming the biggest drips after relatives you'd rather not mention. When the thunder gets especially loud, you herd everyone into the safest room, usually the kitchen, by virtue of it being the driest and closest to the snacks. You wait out the worst of it together, sipping lukewarm tea, listening to the rain on the roof, and telling ghost stories that all somehow involve mysterious puddles and haunted buckets. After the storm passes, you survey the damage. There's a wet pile of towels, a fresh water stain blooming on the ceiling, and a laundry list of repairs that will have to wait for better weather or a miracle. Still, everyone's accounted for, no one floated away, and the house is somehow still standing, even if it now includes a few extra indoor pools. You dry off, put the pots back in their rightful places, and patch the leaks as best you can, armed with tar paper, leftover string, and stubbornness. The laughter from earlier lingers, buoying you up even as you plan your next move. Because in a world where storms come and go and patience wears thin, sometimes the only thing you can do is keep moving, keep mopping, and keep finding reasons to laugh, rain or shine. Sometimes you need to make the impossible happen, again. You wrap up a wedding ring or your only decent pair of shoes and head for the pawn shop, where dignity gets traded for dollars and hope. Negotiation is an art form, and every transaction is a careful calculation. What can you part with? And what will you need to buy back before Sunday church? The pawn shop isn't just a store, it's a confessional booth, a safety net, and sometimes a last resort rolled into one cramped, slightly dusty room. The bell above the door jingles as you enter, a sound that might as well be a drum roll for the most dramatic moment of the week. The walls are lined with everything from bicycles and battered trumpets to jewelry that sparkles with old stories. Behind the counter, the pawnbroker waits, equal parts judge, banker, and sympathetic priest. He's seen it all, tears, haggling, desperate promises, and wild optimism in equal measure. Today, you bring in a family heirloom, a ring, a watch, maybe a set of silver spoons reserved for company that no longer comes. You hold it for a moment, weighing the memories against the mortgage. Parting with it stings, but you do it anyway, wrapping it carefully in a handkerchief and laying it on the counter like a peace offering. The pawnbroker inspects it with a magnifying glass, nods, and offers a sum that's both disappointing and oddly hopeful. You sigh, accept, and pocket the bills, already earmarked for flour, coal, and maybe, just maybe, a penny treat for the kids. Some days, the pawn shop is a repeat stop. You know the rules by heart, 30 days to buy it back, or it's gone for good. Every payday, every extra dime, you count and recount, saving up just enough to reclaim what matters. Sometimes you make it, sometimes you don't. The losses hurt, but the wins, retrieving your Sunday shoes or grandmother's locket, feel like winning the lottery in a world where winning anything is rare. Negotiation becomes a survival skill. You learn to argue your case, to smile at the right moment, to feign indifference to the outcome. Sometimes, you trade stories with the other customers, a neighbor pawning his tools to pay the doctor, a schoolmate's mother haggling over her sewing machine. Everyone is there for a reason, none of them glamorous. Still, there's camaraderie, a kind of silent nod between people making do however they can. You walk home with pockets lighter, but your burdens shared. You've sacrificed a little dignity for a few more days of food, heat, or medicine. The family doesn't ask too many questions. Just glances exchanged over the dinner table, small signs of understanding. You reassure the children that the ring, the watch, the shoes are on vacation, soon to come home. Sometimes it's even true. Every Sunday, you check the windows of the pawn shop on your way to church, looking for familiar treasures. Sometimes you spot your old guitar, or the brooch you wore on your wedding day, displayed with a price tag that makes you wince. You promise yourself you'll bring it home. You promise yourself a lot of things. Until then, you hold your head high, smoothing your thrifted dress, knowing that everyone in the pews has made their own bargains. In the end, the pawn shop is just another part of the depression landscape, a place where hope is measured in weeks, memories are briefly bartered for bread, and promises are made, broken, and made again. You get by not because you never lose, but because you keep finding ways to try. One careful negotiation, one small sacrifice, one stubborn promise at a time. No email, no texting, just ink, paper, and the steady ache of missing someone. You write letters to cousins in California, to brothers riding the rails, to anyone who might answer. Each envelope is stuffed with news, longing, and sometimes a dime for the train home. When a reply comes, The whole house gathers round to hear news from somewhere less worn down, even if it's just a recipe and a reminder to hang in there. The mail is a lifeline, thin as the worn paper you use and twice as fragile. On good weeks, there's enough left after groceries for a stamp or two. Otherwise, you ask the postman to put it on my tab, a request so common it's practically a punchline. You hunt for scraps of clean paper and an envelope that isn't already half addressed. Sitting at the kitchen table in the slanting light, pen poised above the page. There's an art to condensing a month's worth of living into a single 1-ounce window to the outside world. You open each letter with ceremony, savoring the feel of the paper and the ghost of familiar handwriting. The news is rarely grand. Someone got a job, someone else lost one. Aunt Mabel's gout is acting up again, and the dog finally caught the chicken he's been chasing all summer. You jot down updates of your own. The weather, always unpredictable. The garden, growing mostly. The latest family drama, never dull. Sometimes, when words run dry, you tuck in a newspaper clipping, a pressed wildflower, or a photo faded to near invisibility. There's a kind of honesty in letter writing you don't find anywhere else. You admit to missing the old days, to worrying too much, to not knowing what next week will bring. But you also sneak in jokes and little drawings. A child's lopsided smiley face, a doodle of a sun shining over a field of improbable vegetables. You send recipes, how to stretch beans, how to make coffee last another pot, how to pretend lard sandwiches are a delicacy. Replies are unpredictable. Sometimes, weeks pass before the mailman appears at your door, hat tipped low, with a thin envelope from hundreds of miles away. You gather everyone around, letting the anticipation build. This is better than radio, better than pie, and much, much rarer. You read aloud, letting each sentence settle over the room. There's laughter at Uncle Bill's joke, a tear when a cousin says she's coming home, a shared sigh when someone writes, "We're all right, we're getting by." You tuck the letters in a box with the others. A patchwork archive of family, memory, and hope. On hard days, you take them out, smoothing the creases, rereading favorite passages. They remind you that you're part of something larger. A web of people stretched across states and towns, all struggling, all hoping, all holding on. Sometimes, if you can spare it, you include a dime in the envelope, wrapped in paper so it doesn't clink. It's an invitation, come visit if you can, and a little insurance against the miles. The rare times someone takes you up on it, there are tears, laughter, and late-night stories told around the stove until the fire burns low. Writing letters is an act of faith. You trust your words will reach their mark, that somewhere, someone is reading them with a smile or a tear. You trust that news, good or bad, is better shared, that hope, when it's folded into an envelope, multiplies along the way. In a world where so much is uncertain, those letters from afar are steady anchors. They keep you grounded, keep you dreaming, and remind you, no matter the distance, that you're never truly alone. Sometimes, all it takes to keep going is a scrap of paper, a postage stamp, and the hope that tomorrow will bring another envelope, another story, another reminder to hang in there. And so, as the night settles and you pull your blanket a little closer, take a moment to breathe out the day. You've just survived the world of the Great Depression housewife, on rations, on hope, and sometimes just on sheer stubbornness, through scraped-together meals, patched-up socks, and radio static that sounded suspiciously like optimism. You witnessed what it really meant to keep a family alive when the world felt like it was falling apart. You made it through stormy nights with leaky roofs and laughter that doubled as roof repair. You found comfort in borrowed sugar and a neighbor's smile, in canned peaches saved for a special Sunday, and in letters that traveled farther than most people ever would. You saw that a good day was sometimes just everyone making it to bed in one piece, with a little pie, if you were lucky. It's easy to forget, in our era of grocery delivery and smart thermostats, just how much grit and creativity it took to make it through each day back then. There were no easy fixes, no shortcuts, just love, tenacity, and an endless ability to turn making do into something that almost resembled joy. Housewives of the Depression were part magician, part engineer, part comedian, and full-time optimist, because giving up simply wasn't on the menu. So tonight, as you tuck into your clean sheets, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to those who held families together with nothing but a wooden spoon and a prayer. Because history isn't just the story of kings and wars, it's the story of people who refused to give in, who kept the fire burning and the soup pot going, even when there was barely anything left to throw in. Rest easy, knowing you're wrapped in the resilience of generations who made it through the hardest days. Tomorrow, the world will still be here, full of challenges and tiny miracles, just like it always was. Good night.